Welcome back to GameSpot Universe, guys. Ryan and Greg here, and we're going to break down another episode of Legion. This is episode 6 of season 3. Why are you looking at your watch? What are you doing?
I'm sorry, everyone. I have to go. I will be back, though. I'll be back next week.
I can't do this alone.
I'm sorry. It's okay. You got this.
All right, looks like Greg went on vacation. Not sure what time he went to, but let's hope that time does not collapse around me as I'm trying to break down this episode for you guys. Remember, there are tons of spoilers ahead. There are tons of spoilers. So if you haven't watched the show yet, come right back here.
It's called the city, also known as the real world.
What makes it real?
I'll explain when you're older.
Now this episode was pretty awesome, a very standalone episode because all of it, or most of it, takes place on the astral plane. And we welcome back some familiar faces, the Birds, Oliver and Melanie Bird, who we haven't seen since last season. Remember, when we last saw them, they were reunited and decided to go live on the astral plane and get away from all these real-world problems.
The world ended.
Oh, sweetheart, don't be so dramatic. It didn't end. It's still out there.
I'm exaggerating. She had to when I did it.
Sunrise, sunset, everybody toiling away.
Toil.
Good versus evil, all that sort of thing. We just don't do that sort of thing anymore.
No.
Now, life on the astral plane is pretty chill. We see Oliver walking around the forests and gardens of the astral plane, and he comes across these mementos from the real world, right? Different childhood possessions, different garden gnomes, bicycles, shoes, socks, and stuffed animals. And basically we learn that the astral plane is also a magnet for lost dreams and lost minds. So if something happens to you in the real world, well, your mental capacity will then transfer over to the astral plane. And in this case, a baby pops up. Because remember, Sid was basically wiped of her mind last episode after David and all of Legion kind of consumed her and overwhelmed her. Now, the astral plane isn't completely safe. We soon learn of a new character, the Wolf, played by Jason Mantzoukas in an amazing role this episode, a standout role, I'm gonna say. And basically, he is the big threat on the astral plane. There's a constant tension between what Melanie and Oliver Bird represent on the astral plane, as opposed to the Wolf, who's feeding on the innocence and the hopeless and the broken minds that are on the astral plane. Now, if you pay close attention, obviously time moves differently on the astral plane. It's not really clear as to how much time Sydney is in the astral plane during this course of this episode, but we see years and years of her life progress as we get further and further into the episode. Also, it seems as if you spend more time on the astral plane, you kind of forget your anchor points that were in the real world. So obviously Oliver and Melanie know who Sydney is, but they can't pinpoint exactly who she is in the beginning, who this baby is.
She looks familiar somehow. Sydney. It's okay.
Now this is kind of a surprise, right? Because they've been through quite an ordeal in the first and second seasons, but it's something about the astral plane that makes you forget about your previous life in the real world. Maybe you only understand and remember aspects of it, but you don't really get the full picture unless you're reminded of it, of course, or over the course of some time, maybe then it'll all come back to you, which we see it towards the end of this episode. Now, I love the setting of the astral plane for this episode, but also how they incorporated the big bad wolf into this fairy tale, so to speak, this dreamlike experience that Sydney is having. You know, they use a fairy tale that we're all very familiar with in order to represent what is going on in the astral plane and what's going on with Sydney and inside her internal struggle of trying to get back to the real world and, stop David from ruining and destroying everything that they know about. Obviously, the big bad wolf, or a wolf of any means, has appeared in several cautionary tales that include some of Aesop's fables as well as Grimm's fairy tales. Now, versions of this character have appeared in numerous works and have become the general archetype for a menacing, predatory antagonist. And that's exactly what Jason Mantzoukas is doing in this role. I love how he is obviously in human form, but he has all the mannerisms of a wolf.
Sorry. Listen, don't be mad.
And I can't tell you how much I enjoyed how this was done. I mean, we even got a nod to Three Little Pigs, the wolf outside the straw house trying to blow it down. We definitely know how that house will fare if we know that fairy tale. But in this case, it was, using something familiar that we all know about and what we've all kind of experienced throughout our lifetime, and then kind of interpreting that to this comic book stage. It worked perfectly. Now, an example of the wolf's predatory behavior is found with Cynthia as she's roaming the astral plane alone and comes across the wolf. The wolf will prey on anything that is hopeless, innocent, young. She's a broken individual, and the wolf will take advantage of that and try to get her hooked on drugs and all that kind of stuff, and create a interdependency between her and the wolf itself. Mantzoukas does an awesome job of obviously some comic relief here, but also as a really menacing, kind of sick and twisted character. It was pitch perfect.
Kids die too, Everybody. Your parents. Ooh. That's gotta be scary, knowing that, huh?
And this goes without saying, I was so happy to have Jean Smart and Jermaine Clement back on Legion. It's been way too long since we last saw them. And I love the small little details about these characters that really wrap up this whole world. Oliver Bird calling little Sydney Little Bird, as the young daughter figure of the family. And as strange as it might be that we're on this astral plane and we're in this world that we really haven't seen before, it all really feels at home in Legion. Now, the reason for Sid's journey back through the astral plane is to refocus and redirect her attention to the task at hand. Obviously, the future of the real world as well as the astral plane depends on her stopping David from destroying everything. Early on in the episode, the astral plane is the entire world to her, but as she grows older and older and older, she then realizes that there's much more out there, that there's a real world out there, that it's not just what is living on this astral plane, that there's more than just the wolf as a threat. There's something far greater out there, and that's David. But she has to go through each one of these steps in order to kind of fully realize it, and then the lessons she learns from Oliver and Melanie help along the way. I really love that shot of seeing the astral plane literally on the side ledge of a building in a busy, bustling city. Again, there's really nothing like this show. Let's talk about Melanie's bedtime story that she told Sid. Obviously, it was heavily inspired by Sydney and her own powers that she's experienced throughout her life. She tells a story about a girl who could feel everything, everyone's feelings, the animals and her own, and it was hard for her to determine where her feelings ended and another being's or animal's feelings started. Imagine having to share all that and consume all that feeling in one person. It's overwhelming, obviously, but she says this was a special power that she could kind of reach and have the empathy to feel what others feel, and therefore determine the consequences and how she can play her part in trying to fix things. As we learn later on in the episode, an older Sydney does have the empathy for someone like Cynthia, who's going through some very dark times thanks to the influence of the wolf. Speaking of the wolf, he takes the first opportunity he can to get Cynthia back into his grasp. Now, as the years pass, we see the evolution of Sydney from a toddler to a young adult, and we even see the uncomfortable conversation about sex education.
Well, that's because the cold is a virus, and the sneeze transfers the virus to you. And chlamydia is kind of like a cold, except for your vagina.
I'll be honest, I did not see that coming. Now, a key moment here is that Sid is still having nightmares and dreams of her real-world experiences, so she still has the anchor points of what went down with her and David, falling in love with David, the Shadow King possessing her and attacking them. She still feels all of that, so she's still very much drawn back to the real world and knows that the astral plane is not where she's ultimately going to end up, that she has something else bringing her back to the real world. Now, ultimately, the big bad wolf was too much of a threat in the woods. The straw house is not going to hold him off for much longer. So they moved to the city. Now, the city has its own challenges, right? It's different to raise a young daughter in the city as opposed to the countryside. In the woods, a young Sydney came across death in the representation of that dead fox. Now, that's part of nature's course. But in the city, a lot of things have become rotten. One of the symbols of that is the beating heart on the ground that Sydney comes across. Throughout the course of this episode, she's been taught to learn about love, how to use one's heart, before she can learn about hate. Otherwise, it'll all go to hell, right? That's why with all of her run-ins with the wolf and with Cynthia, she sees the good first. She wants to love first. She has empathy for what they've been through and what they're feeling. Years later in the city, Sid runs into Cynthia yet again, and now she has 2 kids, all of which are impoverished, hopeless, and broken. Cynthia is obviously a drug addict, and the kids are drinking alcohol at a young age. Their names are Sweetie and Blue. Remember, it's always Blue. Now this whole sequence is about tempting the young, tempting the innocent like Sydney, and trying to pull them in and take control of them. We even see in the alley posters of candy being advertised, and soda, and alcohol, and bright lights, and Christmas lights. It's all to tempt the young, the innocent, the hopeless. As a teenager, Sydney quickly realizes that she can help them, that she can save the ones that are hurting, that are in pain, that are downtrodden and broken. So Oliver agrees to help Sydney save Cynthia. Now, I'm not totally on board with this plan. It looks like they got the kids drunk in order to sneak Cynthia away, which would be kind of opposed to the whole good guy, bad guy thing. The kids should not be drinking alcohol that young. Now, again, in perfect Legion fashion, we get another musical number here. It's a rap battle. We've seen the dance-offs before, but now we get a rap battle between the Wolf and Oliver Bird. It was epic.
I'm a hepatitis outbreak at a homeless encampment. I'm realer than real. I only got bad news. Now get out of my way, cause I win and you lose.
But Sydney learns a valuable lesson, that sometimes people don't want to be saved, no matter what she feels for that person and knows that the situation is a bad situation. She at least had to try. The whole point is that she needs to try. And that goes back to her mission in the real world, right? Even if she may fail, she needs to attempt and get back to the real world and make the attempt to stop David from destroying the world. I love this sequence and how they revealed to a much older Sydney, the current present-day Sydney that we see. She finally realizes everything that she's done up to this point in the astral plane and what it's taught her to get her back in the right mindset. And once again, she's reminded of the stakes at play here. It's not just to save the real world. It's also to save everyone on the astral plane.
Remember, it's not us or them. It's us and them.
Entire existence can be wiped out if David's plan goes haywire, if he does end the world. We've already seen different time periods kind of collapse on itself in previous episodes. Who knows what we've lost already? And now Sydney has renewed vigor to stop David at all costs. Now, back on the airship, Sid meets with Carrie and Carrie. And basically, she needs to piggyback off of David's time travel. We don't know exactly where he's going. He has a certain particular place in mind, but it's nowhere that we've seen yet.
One change, one small change, and then everything will be different.
So the baby again, your mom?
No. I have a different plan this time.
There's a very, very touching moment between the 2 Carries that I thoroughly enjoyed. Female Carrie is way too banged up and bruised from her fight before, so she needs to basically go back into male Carrie and then transfer her injuries or her pain over to him so that he can do what he can do without any physical attributes, and she can go fight on behalf of Sydney. Now, unfortunately, the time demons are back, and that's probably the result of David and Switch jumping back into time at the end of last episode. So now they have to deal with those time demons. Now, it's interesting because David basically scared them off last episode. I don't know why they still would come if they know the power that David possesses, that they would still try to take some people. I guess they're just gonna eat up as much time as possible and it'll collapse on everybody. But I don't know if they're gonna be that big of a threat to David because of how he can just wipe them out pretty easily. Now, the bigger threat for David is Division 3. Well, what's left of Division 3? That is Sydney and the 2 Carries. Because Sydney is extremely determined to stop David at all costs.
We're gonna win.
All right, that's it for this week, guys. I cannot wait for next week. It's going to be another awesome episode of Legion. Let me know your thoughts, predictions, and theories in the comments below, and we will see you then. Hopefully, Greg will make it back in time. I'm going to go work on a bracelet so I can try to go find him. I'll see you guys soon.